Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to Conquer Mains 2024. This is a special program launched by Unacademy IAS English to help those aspirants who are preparing for the upcoming mains exam. We have received a lot of requests from students regarding how difficult it is for them to compile all the current affairs notes and link them with the static portion, and more importantly, how difficult it is for students to prepare for answer writing. So we are offering a one-stop solution for all the problems related to your mains exam, and Conquer Mains 2024 is this special initiative. This initiative will take place exclusively on the Unacademy platform from 10 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. For the next 2 months, we will guide you and help you prepare for the mains exam by covering all the current affairs of all the GS subjects, GS 1, 2 and 3, along with the static portion. But students requested for free classes as well, and that is why the initial classes, the first class of every subject, is being provided free on our YouTube channel. But starting from this Monday, that is 8th of July, these classes will shift entirely to the Unacademy app, and this is going to be a paid program. You just have to pay a reasonable price of $9.99. It's a discounted price being provided. But many of you might ask it, you might wonder as well as to why are we charging for this program? Because usually you might have noticed all our initiatives on YouTube and even the special classes on our app, they are completely free of cost. But why are we pricing this program? The reason is we want to attract the serious candidates for mains. We want to ensure we get the best pool of students. And this indeed is a premium program because along with these classes, we are also offering detailed notes which will be shared with you, which will provide the additional content to help you in your answer writing. And every Sunday, there will be a test based on the classes that have been held over the last 1 week. So do enroll for this program. The links are provided in the video description. And with this, let's get started with today's discussion. And let's focus on 5 important topics from international relations. Let's look at the topics that I'm going to discuss, and then we'll take up each topic one by one. So we will be discussing the G20 summit, which was hosted by India last year. This was one of the most significant diplomatic events as far as India's diplomatic calendar was concerned for 2023. India's presidency of G20 was quite eventful and quite successful as well. There were major outcomes, many new initiatives that were announced. So we need to understand this topic in slight detail because there are few topics based on which analytical questions can be asked by UPSC. Next, we are going to discuss the Gaza conflict, the Israel-Hamas war, which has broken out over the last 8 to 9 months. We'll understand its impact and the position of India. And the idea is to help you prepare for any possible question on this topic. Next, we will discuss the international legal framework on human rights, war crimes, and genocide. Because this is another trending topic over the last couple of years. We're also going to discuss India's bilateral relations with Maldives and Canada. Because over the last few months, our ties with these two countries have taken a hit. So these are the 5 topics I have chosen for the first class for international relations. Now, before I start, let me tell you, the focus of my discussion would be entirely analytical. I'll not focus too much on the facts because I'll be providing those facts in the form of written notes. How can you access these notes? You just have to go to the description box of this video and you will find the link to download not just the annotated PPT, but also the PDF of this written notes. This document will provide you certain factual points which could help you in your answer writing. Since mains is more analytical, it's more critical oriented, where it requires your critical analysis, the session will also focus on the analysis part of it. Of course, facts will come everywhere, but the focus of my discussion would be the critical analysis so that I can help you in your answer writing skills. Plus, we can link the current affairs developments with the static portion, and thus you will have the entire content required to write good answers for the questions that might appear from these topics. So let's begin the discussion by looking at the first topic, the G20 summit and India's presidency. As I was mentioning, India held a successful G20 summit, and it was a very eventful summit with a lot of major outcomes. The New Delhi Declaration was signed by the G20 members. This indeed was a significant outcome of the G20 summit because India was hosting the G20 during a very difficult period, because the world was divided as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Western countries had targeted Russia with economic sanctions. Russia had been boycotted and isolated by the West. And in the midst of these geopolitical tensions, India held the prestigious G20 summit. So it was not an easy task for India because we had to balance both the sides. We had to bring the Western partners together with Russia and convince all of them, mediate between them to bring out a final declaration. So India did see a big success when we succeeded in bringing the G20 members together and when we adopted the New Delhi Declaration. Now I'll take you through the major outcomes that were mentioned in this document. We will take a quick look at the major outcomes and the achievements of the G20 summit under India's presidency. This will provide you all the required facts to answer any question on the outcomes of the G20 summit. Later, we will carry out a critical analysis regarding India's role and how India has positioned itself as a leader of the global south and the developing and underdeveloped countries by utilizing the opportunity provided by the G20. So first, let's look at the major outcomes. The biggest achievement of India's presidency of G20 was the admission of African Union as a permanent member to the G20. You might know that the G20 comprised of 19 countries, the top 19 economies of the world, which included some of the developed economies, which includes the G7 as well, the industrialized nations, plus the emerging developing economies like India, South Africa, Brazil, and the others. Apart from these 19 top emerging economies and developed economies, it also included a regional organization, which is the European Union. So that is why it became the G20. 19 top economies plus the EU made up the G20. So now, due to India's efforts, a new member has been added, which is African Union, which is the regional grouping that represents Africa. See, prior to the G20 summit, India was hosting a number of G20 related events. And one big event which India initiated was the Voice of the Global South Summit. The Voice of the Global South Summit. The term Global South in international relations refers to the developing and underdeveloped countries of the world. So India has been a leader of the developing and underdeveloped nations since 1947, since independence. This is nothing new to India. India has always provided leadership to the developing and underdeveloped countries at the global level and provided them with a voice. India has been the voice of the voiceless nations to raise some of the important global issues. But this time, India took its role one step forward by establishing a new initiative, the Voice of the Global South Summit, and thus re-establishing its position as the leader of the Global South. In fact, before the G20 summit, few months before the G20, India organized this summit, brought together many developing and underdeveloped countries together in order to generate their opinions, their concerns, and ensure that the concerns of the Global South is also represented at the Global South. And after the G20, G20 was held in September 2023. A few months later, in November 2023, India hosted the second Voice of Global South Summit in order to update those developing and underdeveloped countries regarding the progress, regarding the achievements that India managed to secure at the G20 as the leader of the Global South countries. This was a remarkable initiative of India, and we used the platform to bring out many other initiatives through the New Delhi Declaration, which will benefit developing nations, poor countries, and underdeveloped countries especially the countries in Africa. Africa has very limited representation at global platforms. If you look at United Nations, especially the UN Security Council and other key UN bodies and organs, Africa as a region has very limited representation. India has always been calling for reform of these institutions. So at the G20, India felt that Africa as a continent needs to be represented. The voices from Africa needs to be heard. The concerns of African nations, the developmental issues, climate change related issues, security related issues, they need to be heard at the global level. So with this intention, India championed the cause of the global south and pushed for the membership for African Union, which was unanimously accepted by all the G20 members. So this was a remarkable achievement of India, and thanks to India's efforts and India's leadership role, African Union has now been admitted to the G20. So essentially, right now we have 21 members in the G20. Next, the next big initiative, the Global Biofuels Alliance, was set up under India's leadership to shift towards cleaner forms of energy, to reduce emissions, keeping in mind the targets of the Paris Agreement in order to tackle global warming and climate change. India has been working with like-minded countries to adopt alternative fuels like biofuels. So India, along with few other countries, a total of 9 countries that included US, Brazil, Argentina, and even non-G20 members like Bangladesh and United Arab Emirates, Mauritius, and the others, they all came together to establish this global initiative called Global Biofuels Alliance. The goal is to step up biofuel production and promote the adoption of biofuel in order to reduce emissions and adopt cleaner alternative fuels. The next big outcome of New Delhi Declaration was the announcement of a mega connectivity project, the IMEC corridor, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. This has to be one of the biggest initiatives announced at the G20. India, along with United States, along with Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and major European powers like France, Germany, and the European Union, they came together to announce this mega connectivity initiative, which could rival China's Belt and Road Initiative. So under the IMEC corridor, the idea is to link India with the Arabian Gulf, the Persian Gulf, and create a transport corridor through the sea route and also through the railway and road network to connect major ports of India with UAE, which is a key energy supplier to India. Further, the route will connect with Saudi Arabia through the railway network and road network present in the West Asia region, and this network will transit through Jordan and Israel to reach the Haifa port, the strategic Haifa port in Israel. From here, the route will extend towards Europe to connect with the Piraeus port in Greece and then link with Italy, France, and Germany and the rest of Europe. This has to be one of the most ambitious connectivity projects proposed by India and the other like-minded partner countries. So this was one big outcome which we saw through the New Delhi Declaration. Then, there were many more achievements to India's credit. As India was hosting the summit, we managed to bring out consensus in other key areas of development. For example, the G20, as it mainly focuses on the global economy, there was a discussion on financial inclusion. So G20 countries brought out a global partnership for financial inclusion under India's leadership. Because India has a lot of expertise in promoting financial inclusion, in ensuring that the weaker sections are included in the financial system. So India's digital public infrastructure, which provides the foundation for payment systems like UPI, and the JAM Trinity of India, the Jandan Financial Inclusion Initiative with Aadhaar and mobile phone, the linking of these three, the JAM Trinity, has enabled India to implement direct benefit transfer, where government benefits, welfare benefits can be directly transferred to the beneficiaries. And India has played a transformative role in changing the economic financial landscape in the country. So based on this success, financial inclusion was one of the primary agendas of the G20, and all the partner countries have adopted the global partnership for promoting financial inclusion on the lines that India has achieved. Next was a goal to triple the global renewable energy capacity by 2030. This was again focused on climate change and global warming in order to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels and bring down emissions and switch to cleaner forms of energy. The global target for adoption of renewable energy has been tripled by 2030. This is in line with the commitments that countries have made with regard to the Paris Agreement. Then the G20 brought out a commitment to ensure global food security and nutrition, because some recent events have disrupted food supplies and food production. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic was a major disruptor. It disrupted the global supply chains. It disrupted agriculture and the food supply chains. Then the conflicts, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel-Gaza conflict. These wars and conflicts also have disrupted food production and food supplies. And as a result, food security has come under increasing concern. Even climate change, which has increased extreme weather events, is affecting agricultural productivity. So to help the poor countries, the developing countries, with regard to food security and nutrition, this global commitment was adopted. Then also, there was focus on healthcare. By drawing lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, the global community has acknowledged that the world was not well prepared to deal with such a large-scale pandemic. So following the lessons learned from COVID-19, G20 countries have adopted a healthcare initiative to make the global healthcare system more resilient and to promote research, disease surveillance, development of vaccines, so that future epidemics and pandemics can be contained. And also, as part of Sustainable Development Goals, there are priority health targets, from contagious diseases to various life-threatening conditions, which are being tackled through the United Nations. So healthcare resilience and research initiative was brought out through the G20 summit. And also under the finance track, there was focus on regulation of cryptocurrencies, as cryptocurrencies have often been misused for tax evasion, money laundering, and even terrorist financing. So G20 countries have agreed that there should be a global regulatory framework for cryptocurrencies while promoting the advantages of blockchain technology. And the G20 also agreed that multilateral development banks, such as the World Bank and Asian Development Bank, the new development bank of BRICS, all these multilateral development banks, they should step up their funding for developmental projects around the world with focus on developing and underdeveloped countries. So all these commitments were secured along with a discussion on tackling terrorism. India is one of the biggest victims of state-sponsored terrorism. So G20 countries, they spoke about the need to curb the spread of small arms, which helps terror groups to plan and organize terrorist attacks. The G20 countries also brought out a statement against terrorist safe havens, where terrorists easily find a safe haven, usually with state support, which in a way was a reference to the state support that Pakistan provides for terrorist organizations against India. So these were the significant outcomes of the G20, which were contained and outlined under the New Delhi Declaration. Now, based on this, what kind of questions can you anticipate? What kind of questions can be predicted, and how do you prepare for answer writing? Let me tell you, there could be two types of questions based on this important topic. Either a question on the Voice of Global South Summit and how India emerged as a leader of the Global South and established its position as a leader of the Global South, or a question on the IMEC project, the opportunities it presents, the challenges that needs to be overcome in order to successfully execute this ambitious project. So either on one of these two topics, there could be a mains question this time. So let's quickly discuss a model answer. Let me help you structure an answer, and this would basically help you in your answer writing skills as well. For the remaining 4 topics, however, the questions, practice questions, along with model answers, will be provided in the weekly test, the Sunday test, which will take place tomorrow. Is that clear? So only for the first topic we are going to discuss the question and the answer. For remaining 4 topics, the questions along with model answers will be shared with you following the Sunday test. So let's look at this question. India's presidency of G20 summit led to major outcomes, with India establishing itself as the voice of the global south. Comment. It's a very straightforward question. If you understood whatever we discussed, I'm sure you should be able to write a good answer for this. See, the key to write a good answer is to ensure that there is a good structure to your answer. Maintaining a good structure, maintaining the logical flow of thought is extremely important. Whatever content you have, whatever knowledge or information you have regarding the topic, you need to present this in a concise manner. You need not write any unnecessary points. You need not explain what is G20, who are the G20 members, what's the history of G20. That is not relevant for the given question. Is that clear? The question is very specific to India's presidency of the G20 summit in 2023 and how India established itself as the voice of the global south. So that is the question here. So you should keep in mind the word limit as well. You can't exceed the word limit by a big margin, or you can't fall short of the word limit by a big margin. Approximately, your answer should be within 250 words. It should be concise, precise to the given question. There should be a proper structure and a logical flow of thought has to be maintained. So how do you do this? Start with a good introduction which is relevant to the given question. Many students make a mistake by writing random points they know about G20. Don't do that. Don't beat around the bush. You will not get any points for writing about the history and the background of G20. Instead, talk about the voice of the Global South Summit. Mention that India took this initiative and organized the voice of the Global South Summit so that developing and underdeveloped countries could have a voice at the G20. We organized a summit prior to the summit and after the summit as well. So you can start with that, or you can mention how India successfully hosted the G20 and succeeded in bringing out the New Delhi Declaration, under which there was a lot of priority given for the global south issues. Even that can be a good introduction. You can mention that through the New Delhi Declaration, India ensured that many of the G20 commitments and initiatives focused on developing nations and their issues. The issues of the global south were prioritized by India. So that is a right opening, a right introduction. Now, in the body, you need to justify your argument. How can you justify? You can provide the examples of all the initiatives, the outcomes that I was mentioning. The outcomes that are specific to the global south will have to be mentioned in slight detail. For example, mention the membership given to African Union, which was possible due to India's efforts. Talk about initiatives related to climate change, renewable energy, initiatives related to health, the finance and economy related initiatives, the food security related initiatives. All these initiatives are primarily designed to help the global south. Is that clear? This will assist the developing countries, the poor countries, to rebuild their healthcare system, to make a transition towards cleaner energy, to minimize the impact of climate change. So this will primarily benefit the global south. So once you provide an explanation of these outcomes and achievements in the body, you are justifying your argument that you made in the introduction. So you are maintaining the connectivity, you are maintaining the logical flow of thought. Finally, you can conclude your answer. In the conclusion, you can state that India has always positioned itself as a leader of the global south since 1947. Maybe you can cite a reference. Post-independence, India supported decolonization. We supported several countries at global platforms like United Nations, at WTO, and we gave a voice to the voiceless countries. You can even mention climate change negotiations and how India gave leadership during the negotiations related to Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement, and how we gave a voice to the developing world and the global south. So this is nothing new to India. So what India has done through the Voice of Global South Summit during G20 is that we have cemented that leadership position. So this can be a conclusion. You can state that India has always positioned itself as a leader of the Global South, raising the issues of the Global South at the global level. But through the Voice of Global South Summit during G20, India cemented that position, firmly established itself as the sole leader of the Global South. So this can be a good conclusion. It is in line with the introduction and you are maintaining the continuity in your answer. So this is how you can build a good structured answer for these questions. The next question, I will leave it for you. I want you guys to attempt this question. Write an answer for this and mention the answer in the comment section below. Please take this as an assignment. As I told you, the remaining 4 questions for the remaining 4 topics that will be shared with the weekly test along with the model answers. But take this as an assignment. This question is related to IMEC project. It's a very straightforward question. It's asking you about the potential of IMEC for global connectivity, but there are significant challenges that could affect its establishment. So that is what you need to discuss. I already explained the advantages, the significance of IMEC. It will not just be a transport corridor for goods. It will also include a data cable, electricity grids, and as well as hydrogen pipelines. So energy transmission, data transmission, along with transportation of goods will be the focus of the project. It can transform the economies of the region. It can give India access to West Asian and European markets. Right? It has great strategic potential because it can rival and counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. So you can go on about all these advantages, but there are many challenges. For example, the Gaza war has disrupted stability in West Asia and it has raised questions about the viability of the project. So you can talk about that. Talk about the divisions between Iran and Israel, the ongoing rivalries in West Asia between Shia and Sunni powers, and how the Gaza conflict has destabilized the whole region, which could possibly render this project unviable. Talk about issues in funding. Countries right now have committed to execute the project, but they may not be able to raise the funds because this would require billions and billions of dollars in funding. There could be problems in execution, right? In the actual establishment of the project, there could be challenges. So bring out all these challenges with focus on the conflicts and the tensions and the volatility in West Asia, which could derail the IMEC. And in the conclusion, provide a small way forward as to how India can ensure that IMEC project can be a success. We need to work with all the partners in West Asia, with our Western partners, to ensure that IMEC becomes a success. So on these lines, try to write an answer and please post that in the comment section. Now let's look at the second topic, the Israel-Hamas war. What is its impact on global geopolitics and on West Asia? And more importantly, what is its impact on India's interests and what has been India's position on the conflict? So let's take a look at this topic. So on October 7th, last year, a Palestinian extremist outfit called Hamas carried out a deadly terror attack against Israel. Hamas fired thousands of rockets aimed at civilian territory. Hundreds of Hamas operatives, they infiltrated into Israel and slaughtered close to 1,200, 1,300 Israeli civilians. This happens to be one of the biggest attacks that Israel has ever faced. Following this, Israel declared war against Hamas. It committed to wipe out Hamas from its existence and it declared war in Gaza. Israel has since then pounded Gaza with thousands of rockets and missiles. It has carried out a full-on invasion, a ground invasion, and it has further enhanced the blockade around Gaza Strip. Since 2005, Gaza Strip was blockaded by Israel, which has affected its development, its access to outside world. That's why Gaza is often called the world's largest open-air prison. So in such a blockaded territory, which is under Israeli occupation, Israel has used maximum force, disproportionate force, allegedly, and this has led to large-scale casualties. More than 35,000 Palestinians have been killed. And this war has indeed disrupted West Asia and as well as the rest of the world. So it is definitely a very important topic. So what is the impact of the war? How has it affected West Asia and the world? What is its impact on India? That's what we need to understand, because there can be a question, a critical question based on this topic. First and foremost, the war has without a doubt destabilized the West Asia region. It has actually rendered some of the new initiatives, the peace initiatives that had been started, useless. A few years ago, the US mediated the Abraham Accords in 2020 and established peace between major powers such as UAE and Israel. This was followed by Bahrain, which also signed the Abraham Accords mediated by the United States. And UAE and Bahrain became one of the few Arab powers to recognize Israel and establish peaceful diplomatic relations with Israel. It was followed by few North African countries like Sudan and Morocco also recognizing Israel and setting up ties with Israel. This initiative has now been completely derailed because of the conflict that has broken out. Plus, the regional divisions, the regional tensions have shot up, especially between Iran and Israel. They have been regional rivals from a very long time, and Iran is accused of sponsoring various proxy outfits against Israel, and Hamas is one of them. Iran is known to sponsor Hamas and as well as Hezbollah. If Hamas operates in Gaza and if its leadership is based in Qatar, then Hezbollah is mainly based out of Lebanon and also parts of Iraq and Syria. These extremist groups are funded by Iran and they are used as proxies of Iran to target Israel. And Israel also has often targeted Iran, especially its nuclear weapons program. And there is a history of covert conflict and tensions between them. So now with the Gaza war, these tensions are out in the open. And as you witnessed recently, Iran and Israel even exchanged weapons, or they exchanged fire, resulting in a limited conflict between the two. Israel apparently targeted an Iranian diplomatic mission in Syria, where top Iranian officials were killed. And Iran retaliated with a major strike, launching hundreds of missiles and rockets aimed at Israel. Israel managed to deflect the attack, but however, the tensions have definitely gone up and the covert war between the two has definitely stepped up. Iran has even sponsored the Houthis of Yemen to target the commercial ships passing through Red Sea, and thus commercial shipping and transportation has been disrupted in West Asia. This is a direct outcome of the conflict. Then don't forget the Shia-Sunni rivalries that existed. Iran as the Shia leader and Saudi Arabia as the Sunni leader, they have a history of rivalry between them. They lead their own respective power blocks. Iran gets the backing of Syria, Lebanon and other Shiite powers, whereas Saudi Arabia has the backing of other Sunni powers like UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, etc. Recently, China had played the role of a mediator and it had established a detente between them. Just months before this war broke out, China played the role of a mediator and it secured a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This was historic. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore the diplomatic relations which had been suspended, and they agreed to maintain a peaceful relationship. So because of the mediation of US through Abraham Accords and due to the mediation of China, through which a detente was achieved between Iran and Saudi Arabia, things were actually stabilizing in West Asia for the first time in 30 to 40 years. Now this limited peace has been broken, instability has gone up, volatility has increased, the regional divisions and rivalries have again gone up. This is extremely bad news, not just for the region, but for India and for rest of the world. Along with this, global divisions have gone up. The United States continues to be the biggest backer of Israel, the supporter of Israel. US continues to provide funding and weapons to Israel, which is arming Israel in this war. But US also has been critical of the disproportionate force that Israel has allegedly used against the civilians, Palestinian civilians in Gaza. It has turned many countries against Israel, even many Western friends of Israel from Europe, like Germany, France, United Kingdom, right, and even Netherlands, Norway, Belgium, Sweden, which are all usually on the Western bloc. They've all turned against Israel. They've condemned the widespread usage of force, disproportionate force that Israel has been using in this conflict. Given the large-scale human casualties, civilian casualties, the blockade of humanitarian aid, Israel has been accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. It has even been accused of committing a genocide against Palestinians. So this has created an unprecedented humanitarian situation. Large-scale human rights violations have been reported. On one hand, Hamas was the first to carry out large-scale human rights violations through this attack on October 7th. And Israel has later allegedly committed large-scale violations through its usage of disproportionate force. Of course, this entire conflict has a history, a complex history behind it. This conflict did not begin on the 7th of October, right? The conflict dates back to 1940s, to the very question of Israel and Palestine. But of course, I'm not exploring that entire background here, as it may not be very relevant for the exam. But any question in the mains will focus on the current events and on the impact the war is having on the region and the world, and also on India's interests. So for the background, I will share some of the notes. I'll provide few pointers regarding the background that is needed in the written notes. But as far as the analysis is concerned, understanding the situation, the regional divisions, the global tensions, this is more than sufficient. Next, the entire conflict has brought back the question of Palestine, the right of Palestinians to have their own country. There is a debate going on in the world whether should we push towards a two-state solution as it was promised through the United Nations back in 1947. Israel had violated the two-state plan when it unilaterally declared independence in 1948. Since then, Israel has never allowed Palestine to be formed as a country. In fact, Israel has even gone on to occupy Palestinian territories in Gaza and in West Bank, and it is accused of committing human rights violations against Palestinians. Palestinian extremist groups like Hamas and others have targeted Israel as well, carrying out terror attacks against Israel. So this has become a very complex, never-ending conflict which has consumed the region. So the question of recognizing Palestine as a solution has been proposed again. Countries are evaluating the viability of this. Few countries have already accorded recognition as well to Palestine as a country. As of now, it's not a recognized nation state, as it is not a UN member yet, but you never know in the coming months, if things work out, Palestine might very well get recognition, thus fulfilling the two-state plan. So this question has come up. So you need to understand what is India's position on this. And finally, the regional stability which has been affected will derail all the positive initiatives that had been started in the region. Not just the Abraham Accords, which was pushed by the US, but even the I2U2 initiative. This included India and Israel and United States and UAE. These four major powers recently had established I2U2 initiative to promote economic cooperation. Then the IMEC project, which I discussed earlier, which was proposed at the G20. This project could be derailed even before it can start, because given the instability and given the route of the project which passes through Israel, and given the current state of conflict here, it could be unviable to even consider establishing the IMEC project. So all these positive initiatives which could have transformed the region, brought peace and stability and prosperity to the region, they have been derailed, at least temporarily. They have been put on hold. And this is one of the biggest negative outcomes of the war. Now, coming to the big question, what is the impact of this war on India? How Indian interests have been affected? What is India's position? See, India came out openly on the 7th of October and criticized the attack by Hamas as a terrorist attack. As you know, India has very good relations with Israel. We have strategic defense relations and very close economic ties and diplomatic relations. In line with this commitment, India supported Israel to defend itself against terrorism. because this is a consistent position of India. India itself is a victim of terrorism. So India could in no way accept the kind of attack that Hamas carried out. So India did point out that this was a terrorist attack. India defended the right of Israel to act against terrorism. But however, India's position on this issue is a carefully balanced position. Till date, we have never designated Hamas as a terrorist outfit. Under the anti-terror laws that we have, which is the UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, India has never designated Hamas as a terrorist outfit, because many countries don't look at Hamas as a terrorist organization. Especially the Arab states, they look at Hamas as a national liberation movement, which is fighting for the rights of Palestinians. So India would like to maintain that balanced position between Israel and the Arab states while maintaining our ideological support for the creation of Palestine. This is the careful, diplomatic, balanced tightrope walk that India has been performing from many, many years. So we did condemn the attack as a terrorist attack. We supported Israel's right to defend itself against terrorism, but we have not labeled Hamas as a terrorist outfit. More importantly, India has repeatedly voted in favor of Palestine. Since 1947, we have an ideological commitment to support the creation of Palestine. This ideological position has not changed, irrespective of which government is in power or which party is in power. Even the Modi government reiterated India's support for the two-state solution, and India has repeated that two-state plan is the only viable, lasting solution to bring this conflict to an end. And India has parallelly criticized Israel wherever necessary. With regard to the alleged human rights violations committed by Israel and its use of disproportionate force, India has been critical. If not directly, if not explicitly, we have done it implicitly by abstaining from some votes that was targeting Israel. In some cases, we have voted against Israel as well to signal India's lack of support for large-scale human rights violations which are allegedly being committed by Israeli forces. So India has taken this balanced position at the United Nations, the UN Human Rights Council, the UN General Assembly. On certain resolutions, we supported the creation of Palestine. We have condemned Israel's disproportionate use of force, the large-scale human rights violations that have happened, and even the blockage of aid, how Israel was blocking the delivery of medicines, food and water and electricity. India has been critical of these actions of Israel. In fact, India even dispatched aid material to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. If you remember, when the war broke out through the Rafah border crossing via Egypt, India dispatched relief material to help out the Palestinians who were trapped in Gaza as a result of this conflict. So this is a very important point that you need to bring up in your answer. And especially when Israel launched a full attack on Rafah, where 1.5 million Palestinians have been cornered, India was critical of the large-scale use of force, and we joined the global community in condemning the Israeli action. So this has been a balanced position of India, and based on this awareness, you should be able to write an answer on any given question on this topic. The question could either be on how the war has affected India, what is India's position in the conflict, or how the war has affected West Asia and how it has divided global geopolitics. This is what you can expect, and with what we have discussed, I'm sure you should be able to write a good answer. Now let's look at the next topic, which is related to the Gaza war. Let's study the international legal framework on human rights, war crimes, and genocide. This is another important topic according to me, because over the last 2 years, these topics related to human rights, war crimes, and genocide have been in the news. So you should have this basic awareness regarding the international legal framework that exists, the international law that exists to tackle such human rights violations, acts of genocide, and war crimes which might be committed. So first, let's understand the context, why these topics are relevant. First, because of the Russia-Ukraine war. As Russia attacked Ukraine, it was a major breach of the UN Charter. Under the UN Charter, UN member states are expected to respect the sovereignty, the territorial integrity of other UN member states. So Russia clearly breached the UN Charter and its commitment to UN principles. And Russia stands accused of committing major war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine. Russia has been brought up at UN Human Rights Council, the UNHRC. Votes have taken place against Russia at UN Security Council, UN General Assembly, and at various other global platforms. Russia is facing an investigation at the International Criminal Court, which has already issued an arrest warrant against Russian President Putin and many other top Russian officials and military leaders who are allegedly responsible for these war crimes and crimes against humanity. That is one reason why the topic is extremely important. Then with regard to Gaza war, as I was mentioning, Israel is accused of using disproportionate force against civilians. Israel has been accused of committing a genocide by South Africa, and South Africa has even filed a case at International Court of Justice, which is the judicial organ of the UN, and it has pressed these genocide charges against Israel. There is a parallel investigation being conducted by International Criminal Court against Israeli leaders and officials. And even the role of Hamas is under question. ICC is investigating the war crimes and human rights violations committed by Hamas as well during the terror attack. So because of this reason, the topic is very much in the news. Israel is accused of violating the Geneva Conventions. It is accused of violating the Genocide Convention. It has been dragged to International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, and as a result, the topic becomes very, very important. Then we have other conflicts taking place in the world. The conflict in Myanmar, where Myanmar's military junta is accused of committing human rights violations and crimes against humanity by targeting civilian protesters. It's accused of committing a genocide against minority ethnic groups like the Rohingyas. Across Africa, there are multiple civil wars taking place, where few rebel groups and dictatorships have been accused of committing such violations as well. So because of all these events that have occurred in the last 2 years, the international legal framework that governs conflicts and wars and human rights becomes very, very important. So I'll just take you through the important conventions and the legal framework that exists, and I'll present the entire picture to you. Based on this, you should be able to write an answer on a question based on this topic. Let's look at the Genocide Convention. The Genocide Convention was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948 after the Second World War. It was a direct outcome of the Second World War because during the Second World War, the fascist states like Nazi Germany and others, they committed large-scale atrocities against few minority groups. Large ethnic groups, racial groups were targeted. Millions of people were wiped out during the World War, especially the Second World War. And to prevent such acts being committed again and to hold the perpetrators accountable, the Genocide Convention was brought out in 1948. Under the Genocide Convention, the act of genocide has been defined, and you should know about this. There are 5 specific acts which have been mentioned, which amounts to an act of genocide. If there is an intent by a state or even by a non-state actor to destroy an entire group of people on the lines of their nationality or on the lines of their race, their ethnicity, or their religion, if a targeted attempt is carried out to wipe out millions of people, to eliminate, exterminate that entire group, that amounts to an act of genocide. So under this, there are 5 specific acts which are included. It's not just the killing of the members of the group, even causing serious bodily harm and mental trauma based on national lines or racial, ethnic lines or religious lines, imposing harsh living conditions with the intent to destroy the group, that is, cutting off the group from basic necessities like food, medicine, water, electricity. These are basic essentials. If this is deliberately denied through a blockade, as Israel has allegedly done with Palestinians in Gaza, it amounts to an act of genocide. And also, if an attempt is made to prevent new births in the group, to ensure that the population of the group doesn't expand, and if children of the group are forcibly transferred out, like how Nazi Germany did with the Jews during the Holocaust, such acts qualify to be known as an act of genocide. It's one of the most serious crimes recognized under international law, and it applies both during wartime and also during peacetime. Please remember this point, it's very important. It applies even if there is peace. Let's say there is no state of war, but if one state or a non-state actor has targeted an entire group, and if an attempt is made to wipe out the group, even during peacetime, even that amounts to an act of genocide. So existence of a war between two countries is not a necessity. Even if, let's say, one government is doing it against its own people, its own citizens, even that will amount to an act of genocide. And any violations, they are punishable, they can be prosecuted at the International Criminal Court as per the provisions of the Rome Statute. And these cases can even be brought up at ICJ, which is the judicial organ of the United Nations. So at these judicial bodies, either at ICJ or at ICC, or at both, these cases of genocide can be brought up, and the perpetrators, the state which is carrying out these atrocities, can be held accountable. India is a signatory to it. India is a signatory as well to the Genocide Convention, and it prohibits every country, it is binding on all the UN member states as part of their commitment to the UN Charter. Even if they have not signed it, let's say a country has not signed and ratified Genocide Convention, even then it is seen as part of the customary law, international customary law, which becomes binding on all the UN member states. Next, coming to the Geneva Conventions. The Geneva Conventions were also adopted in the context of the post-World War scenario. Because during the World Wars, a lot of atrocities, violations were committed against the non-combatants. Who are the non-combatants? They are the ones who are not actively fighting the war. This could be innocent civilians. It could be medics and aid workers who are providing medical assistance and humanitarian aid. Or it could even be non-combatants such as soldiers who are injured or soldiers who are captured as prisoners of war, because they are no longer involved in the active combat. So soldiers also can be classified as non-combatants if they are injured or stranded. Let's say a naval ship has been destroyed by the enemy and it's no longer functional, but the seafarers are trapped, they're trapped on the ship. So those stranded seafarers cannot be targeted anymore because they are no longer involved in the active conflict. Similarly, soldiers who are captured by the enemy, right? They are POWs. They are recognized as prisoners of war. So their human rights has to be respected. They can't be targeted by the other state. So these are the non-combatants: civilians, medic and aid workers, and those soldiers who are injured or captured or stranded. So there are 4 conventions under Geneva Conventions which provide for this protection for non-combatants. The first Geneva Convention, it provides protection for wounded and sick soldiers who are fighting the war on land. Second Geneva Convention provides a similar protection for seafarers who are stranded at sea, who are stranded on ships and boats and submarines which are no longer operational. The third Geneva Convention offers protection for POWs, prisoners of war. For example, how India had captured almost 95,000 POWs from Pakistan during the 1971 war. India never violated the human rights of the Pakistani POWs. We treated them with respect in line with the commitments made to the Geneva Conventions, and later we returned them as well back to Pakistan, right? So it offers protection for POWs. And the fourth Geneva Convention and the related additional protocols, they provide protection for civilians in occupied territories, including the medics and aid workers. So these non-combatants cannot be targeted during war. Any violation amounts to human right violations, war crimes and crimes against humanity. So to prosecute such cases, we have an international law, the Rome Statute, that was adopted in 1998. It was brought out in 1998 and it came into force in 2002. The Rome Statute established the ICC, the International Criminal Court, to prosecute such leaders and officers, essentially the individuals who are involved in ordering such violations and such atrocities. It specifically covers genocide. It covers 4 types of crimes committed during wars and conflict, including genocide, war crimes as defined under Geneva Conventions, crimes against humanity, and crimes of aggression. On these grounds, leaders of the aggressor countries, military leaders and officials who are involved in these campaigns, who are involved in committing these atrocities, they can be prosecuted at the ICC. Arrest warrants can be issued against them. And if they travel to other countries which are members of the Rome Statute, they will be obligated to arrest them. That is why right now Russian President Putin is not able to leave Russia, travel to other countries, because the other member countries of Rome Statute are obligated to arrest Putin if he lands in their country. Even though he is the Russian head of state, still he would be liable for arrest in another country if it is a member of the Rome Statute. So India is not party to it. Given our internal problems, our internal security situation in Northeast, in Naxal corridor, in Jammu and Kashmir, India has always been worried that such a law could be misused to target India. Maybe external powers could bring up false accusations against Indian forces. And as a result, India has not signed the Rome Statute. We are not party to it. We are not a member of the International Criminal Court. But understanding these existing frameworks, it's very, very important, because there can be a straightforward question based on this. The other related conventions and laws that you should be familiar with includes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, which was the first ever human rights declaration. This was also adopted in the backdrop of the post-World War scenario. To prevent another large-scale human atrocity, the UDHR was brought out. India is a party to it. It was adopted by UN General Assembly. India has signed and ratified it. We even have a national law, the law with regard to human rights, that provides for the establishment of National Human Rights Commission, State Human Rights Commission. Right? India has fulfilled its obligations to the UDHR, even though it's not legally binding. Then you have the Refugee Convention of 1951 and the 1967 Additional Protocol. Even these frameworks are in the news because these conflicts and wars have triggered a major refugee crisis. Ukrainian refugees have fled into other European countries. Refugees from Myanmar, refugees from other conflict zones are entering other countries seeking asylum and protection. So India is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, and we have neither signed the 1967 Additional Protocol because we didn't want to take up any unnecessary legal obligation, because Refugee Convention of 1951 was initially specifically designed for the European context, to deal only with European refugees created by the Second World War. But since it was specific to the European context, India realized that it would not serve our interests, plus our neighborhood was already problematic. From Pakistan and from other neighboring countries, refugees would be flowing into India. So India didn't want to take up any binding obligations. So that's the reason why we never signed the Refugee Convention. Later, it was expanded to cover all refugees by the 1967 Additional Protocol. But India is not a signatory to both of them, so we have no obligations here. But please remember that even these are seen as part of the international legal framework when it comes to the conduct of wars, when it comes to the treatment of civilians and non-combatants and refugees. So all these provisions become very important. Based on this, there can be a question, and you should be able to write an answer based on what we have discussed. There could be a straightforward question. Given the recent conflicts, the question of war crimes and genocide has been in the news. So what do you think of the international legal framework that exists to prevent such atrocities? Or why do you think they are not effective? Right? This could be a very obvious question. If we have so many frameworks, how come these violations are not being prevented? How come the perpetrators are not being punished? Right? It clearly means that the existing legal framework is not effective. So what could be the reason? So a critical analysis question can be asked like this. So there are many reasons why the frameworks that exist are not very effective? One is because they primarily lack enforcement. Even though some of them are legally binding, like Refugee Convention, Genocide Convention, Geneva Conventions, they are legally binding. But still, it can't be enforced strictly because of the ineffectiveness of the United Nations. At the end of the day, any enforcement has to be done through UN Security Council. If any sanctions have to be imposed, right? If economic sanctions have to be imposed, or if responsibility to protect, R2P concept, has to be invoked by UN to approve the invasion of a certain country, to authorize the use of force against a country committing these violations, the approval of UNSC is required. But problem with UNSC is that it's an elite body where all the power is concentrated in the hands of the P5 countries, the 5 permanent members. And these P5 members are misusing their veto to protect their own geopolitical interests. Now, why would Russia vote against itself if there is a resolution brought up at UNSC targeting Russia, seeking to punish Russia for its alleged crimes? Russia would defeat the resolution with its veto. Russia will get the support of China as well. The others are no less. The US, with the support of UK and France, has often derailed the international legal framework by misusing its veto to protect its allies, like Israel, for example, right? So the UN has largely been politicized. The geopolitical divide that exists has led to the misuse of these platforms, and thus most of the framework that exists becomes ineffective. Is that clear? Selectively, some countries have been targeted. Some perpetrators have been punished, especially from poor African countries where few dictators and military leaders carried out a genocide or war crimes. They have been punished by International Criminal Court. But powerful countries like Russia, Israel, which have enough influence, they easily get away with these crimes. They are never held accountable for it, largely because the UN is ineffective. Is that clear? There is a lack of enforcement. There is a lack of global consensus on these issues. That is why the legal framework becomes ineffective. Is that clear? So now let's move on to the last 2 topics. Let's take a quick look at some of the recent developments in India's relations with Maldives. I'm sure many of you would have heard about the tensions and the friction that developed in the relationship over the last few months. So this topic could become very important because last year Maldives went through elections and it got a new president, Mohammad Muizzu, whom you can see in the image over here. Ever since Mohammad Muizzu got elected as the president, he has taken quite a hostile position against India, and you can say that he has taken an anti-India position, and he appears to favor China and other rivals of India, including Pakistan and even Turkey. So this has given rise to concerns about India's interest and influence, and there has been a clear difference of opinion and a friction that has developed between the two. So let's quickly examine the background of India-Maldives relationship and understand how the relations have been affected, not just in the last 1 year, but over the last 1 decade. So UPSC might ask a question, because this is a developing story. It's been happening from 2011, 2012. We have struggled to maintain good ties with Maldives because of certain factors. So you need an understanding of this, a basic understanding, in order to write an answer. See, from 1965 to 2012, India had fantastic relations with Maldives. Under Maumoon Gayoom, who was an authoritarian leader who remained in power for more than 3 decades, from 1970s to 2008, India had very good relations with Maumoon Gayoom's regime. In fact, India was the key provider of all support and assistance, from security and defense assistance to economic support. In every possible way, India was the provider for Maldives. Then later, Maldives transitioned into a democracy under a party called MDP, Maldivian Democratic Party, which has always been a pro-India party. Under the leadership of former President Mohammad Nasheed, Maldives became a good friend of India, and during this period, from 1960s to 2012, Maldives always adopted the India First policy. Meaning India was given the primacy, India was given the priority by Maldivian governments and by Maldivian presidents like Maumoon Gayoom and Mohammad Nasheed when it came to Maldives' relations with other countries. Maldives would always give top priority to India's concerns and interests because India was the biggest supporter, biggest assistance provider to Maldives. For example, in 1988, Maldives had faced a major security crisis. Mamoon Gayoom was facing a coup attempt from a Tamil militant outfit, and it was India which protected Maldives and rescued Mamoon Gayoom under Operation Cactus. Then during the 2004 tsunami that hit the Indian Ocean, India provided disaster management assistance. We have provided economic support and assistance because Maldives has a very small and limited economy. India has been the big source of tourists, which is a major source of revenue for Maldives. India has big investments in Maldives. We have funded key projects. We have provided military hardware and defense support as well. So relations were fantastic until 2011-2012. But starting from 2012, because of internal political changes, we saw the rise of anti-India sentiments, especially under the leadership of Yamin Gayoom. Starting from 2011-12, we saw the rise of anti-India sentiments followed parallelly with pro-China sentiments. As China became a significant player in the Indian Ocean, we saw that China was actively trying to subvert India's influence and interests, and we saw the rise of anti-India leaders and anti-India parties in our neighborhood, including in Maldives. So during this period, Yamin Gayoom's government became pro-China, signed important deals with China, including a free trade agreement. And strategic islands were given on lease to China. Then key Indian projects were cancelled by Yamin Gayoom. We saw the development of anti-India sentiments under a campaign that was started in the later part of Yamin Gayoom's leadership called the India Out campaign. A few extremist elements with close links to China, Pakistan and others. We saw that these local political elements were promoting India Out campaign in order to throw India out and remove Indian presence and influence in the country. So this was a difficult period for the relationship. But in 2018, things came back on track. We saw a complete reversal because the MDP won the elections and came back to power. The pro-India party won the election under Ibrahim Soleh's leadership and reversed this downtrend in the relationship and brought back the India First policy. This was a huge development. So for the last 4 to 5 years, we actually had very good relations with Maldives. We again started providing a lot of economic support and defense support and assistance. And India invested in key projects and the close relations were back on track. India managed to regain the lost influence. But last year, things have again taken a U-turn. With the election of Mohammad Muizzu, who is from the same party as Yamin Gayoom. He's also one of the mentors of Mohammad Muizzu. Yamin Gayoom has groomed Mohammad Muizzu. So he won the elections in 2023 largely based on his anti-India approach. Mohammad Muizzu championed the India Out campaign, blaming India for some of the internal problems. And he promised that if he is elected to power, he would remove the Indian troops and military equipment stationed in Maldives. Because previously, due to the close defense relations we had gifted some military equipment, military hardware, aircrafts and helicopters were gifted by India previously to help in maritime security, reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, and also for helping in evacuation of patients and casualties. This was a goodwill assistance provided by India. So to maintain and operate these aircrafts and helicopters, Indian troops were also stationed. Around 70 to 80 Indian soldiers were stationed in Maldives. But Mohammad Muizzu led a campaign against this Indian military presence. As part of his anti-India campaign, he called for India Out, meaning Indian military presence should be removed. Indian troops and even Indian military equipment should be removed. So this has been the biggest hit. But India has provided a lot of economic assistance. Whenever Maldives faced a crisis, we have provided a standby credit facility to help Maldives overcome any liquidity crisis. India has been a big source of tourism-based revenue. India has funded many critical projects, including the Greater Malay Connectivity Project, and other key projects in the island nation. Alright, so we have enjoyed very good relations in the past. It's only under these two governments, under Yamin Gayoom previously and now under Mohammad Muizzu, that the relationship has been affected. India-Maldives have worked closely at various regional platforms like SAARC grouping, Indian Ocean Rim Association, and also at the Colombo Security Conclave. These are major regional initiatives led by India, where we have worked closely with Maldives. At Colombo Security Conclave, we have promoted close security relations as well between India and Maldives. But now, things have taken a U-turn following the election of Mohammad Muizzu. But however, we are again seeing a reversal in the trend. So it's important to understand some of these recent developments that have taken place. See, after getting elected, Mohammad Muizzu clearly took a position against India, and as promised in his election campaign, he pushed India to remove the troops and the military equipment. India obviously was not comfortable with it. Following this, PM Modi paid a visit to Lakshadweep Islands in the interest of promoting tourism in India, but this generated a negative backlash in Maldives. Even Maldivian ministers in the cabinet of Mohammad Muizzu, they tweeted against India and Indian Prime Minister and used very abusive language. So this triggered a major backlash in India, and it led to outrage on social media. You might remember, #boycott-Maldives started trending on Indian social media, and this had a significant impact on the flow of Indian tourists to Maldives. So India-Maldives relations took a significant hit after this. Then Mohammad Muizzu visited countries like Turkey and China before visiting India. Usually, under the India First policy, Maldivian leaders have visited India first before visiting other countries. But Mohammad Muizzu deliberately visited Turkey and China, which clearly shows the hostile approach that Mohammad Muizzu was taking. But recently, there have been slight improvements. Mohammad Muizzu has reached out to India for economic assistance, because Maldivian economy is under stress. The Maldivian government has reached out to India for some economic support, and more importantly, when the new government was sworn in India after the recent elections, PM Modi had invited several neighboring countries, and Maldives was one of them. Mohammad Muizzu accepted the invite for the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Modi. The Modi government, which has established a coalition government for the third term, held a swearing-in ceremony where regional leaders were invited, and the Maldivian leader accepted the invite and participated in the swearing-in ceremony, which is a positive development. Alright, and regarding the removal of the Indian troops, India has fulfilled the promise that was made. We have removed the troops as per the wishes of Maldives, because we can't force another country to forcefully station our troops in their country. It is their sovereign decision. We have removed the troops, but Indian aircraft and helicopters remain in Maldives. We have replaced the military personnel with civilian personnel from India. See, Maldives had a problem with Indian troops, right? So Indian troops have been removed. All the 70, 80 Indian troops that were there, they have been removed. They have been replaced with civilian personnel from HAL and other Indian defense PSUs to operate and maintain the aircraft and helicopters. So our military equipment is still present, thus establishing our strategic influence. But now it's only being operated and maintained by civilian personnel instead of military personnel. So that way we have reached a kind of a compromise. Plus, Maldives reaching out to India for economic support is good news for India. And also, Mohammad Muizzu accepting the invite and attending the swearing-in ceremony, that created an opportunity for India to talk to Maldives and resolve some of the issues. So we are seeing a slight reversal, but you never know how things will develop in the coming days. So based on this entire development, there can be a question. What is the importance of Maldives for India? Why Maldives is so critical in the Indian Ocean? Because it occupies a strategic location, right? So it has become a power play between India and China, where both are competing for influence across the Indian Ocean. So you need to bring in all these points and recent developments along with the static portion to build a good answer for any such question. Is that clear? Now let's look at the last topic for today, the fifth topic related to India-Canada relations and how they have taken a hit because of certain controversial developments. Recently, Canada has been accused of sheltering pro-Khalistani extremists. This is not a new development. Even in the 1980s, when Khalistan extremist movement was at its peak, when Khalistani insurgency and terrorism posed a significant threat to India in Punjab and abroad, Canada was a base for some of the Khalistani terror outfits. Several wanted Khalistani terrorists and Khalistani sympathizers, they had taken shelter in Canada by misusing the large Sikh diaspora presence in the country. Is that clear? Back in 1980s, when Pakistan was supporting these Khalistani outfits, such as Khalistan Commando Force, Khalistan Tiger Force, Babar Khalsa International, etc. All these were Khalistani terrorist groups that carried out attacks against India. They were all backed by Pakistan. So when India acted against these groups in the 1980s, many of the top leaders and these terrorists, they ran away from India. They took shelter either in Pakistan or in other third countries, especially in Canada. They managed to get some support amongst few members of the Sikh diaspora who also had been radicalized. See, in general, the Sikh community is not in conflict with India. Majority of members of the Sikh community are peaceful, they are peace-loving, they have made a tremendous contribution to our country and they very much see themselves as part of India. But some of these elements, the radicalized sections, right, who have been misled, who have been indoctrinated, who have been misled on this path by the extremist groups with the support of Pakistan, they have championed this cause which has posed a significant threat for India, but we had managed to subdue the threat in the 1990s through intelligence operations and counter-terrorist, counter-insurgency operations, and by reaching out to the local level in Punjab and to the diaspora community. India had contained the threat. Khalistan movement had become a dormant movement. It was no longer a threat for India in 1990s and early 2000. But in the last 14 years, post 2010, we are seeing active attempts to revive the Khalistan movement, especially abroad amongst the Sikh diaspora. Not just in Canada, even in US, in Australia and across Europe, from UK to Germany to Italy, even in West Asian countries, in Southeast Asian countries, from Thailand to Philippines, to UAE, to Saudi Arabia, across sections of the Sikh community, the diaspora community, a few radicalized members are using online platforms and the support by Pakistan to try and revive the Khalistan movement. So India has been closely watching these developments. We have been urging these governments to act against these groups and these elements in order to secure India's security interests. But Canada has been one country which has quite openly extended support for some of the Khalistani extremist outfits. It has not only sheltered some of the wanted terrorists, but it has allowed some of the pro-Khalistani activities to be carried out. For example, Indian diplomats in Canada have been threatened repeatedly. The Indian High Commission and Indian consulates in Canada have been targeted. Open rallies and protests have been conducted by Khalistani sympathizers and extremists by glorifying the assassination of Indira Gandhi and by glorifying the violence of the 80s. Open calls have been issued to target the Indian Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister. So these are clearly anti-India activities, and a friendly country, that too a Western democracy like Canada, was expected to protect India's interests by working with India. But unfortunately, due to domestic politics, because the Sikh diaspora community constitutes a significant vote bank for Canadian parties and the Canadian government depends on their support, it has influenced the Canadian government in an unfortunate way where it has allowed such activities to take place. Even prior to these recent events, when the farmers' protests were taking place, for example, which was purely an internal issue of India, there was an incident where Canadian PM Justin Trudeau spoke about the farmers' protests and tried to interfere in India's internal matters. So India rejected those comments by the Canadian Prime Minister, and later we saw the complete deterioration of the relations. A few years ago, Justin Trudeau was visiting India, and as part of his official delegation, he brought a convicted Khalistani terrorist to India. In the 80s, a Khalistani terrorist was involved in an assassination attempt in India and he has been convicted for that offense. Later, he had taken shelter in Canada and he had become a successful businessman. His name was Jaspal Athwal, and he was being brought back as part of the Canadian Prime Minister's delegation on an official visit. So India reacted to this incident, and we downgraded the relations with Canada. So since the last 4 or 5 years, these issues have been going on, and especially in the last 1.5 years, the issue has really escalated. Especially after the attempted revival of Khalistan movement in India under extremist leaders like Amritpal Singh, plus activities on internet and social media, where a call was given for a Khalistani referendum, a so-called referendum, which was held on online and social media platforms. India has been working very closely with its partner countries to put down the attempt to revive this dangerous extremist movement. But Canada has not been cooperative, and this has hit our relations. But what really blew out the entire situation was the allegation by Canada last year that Indian government, Indian intelligence agency was involved in a targeted assassination on Canadian soil. A Canada-based extremist, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was a designated terrorist. India had designated him as a wanted terrorist under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. He was assassinated by unidentified gunmen. And following this assassination, allegations came up by Canada that Indian government was involved, that the Indian government had ordered the killing through its intelligence agency research and analysis wing. These allegations have been strongly denied by the Indian government, but similar allegations came up later by the United States as well, which is a close strategic partner of India. The US alleged that there was an Indian government attempt, or at least an attempt involving India's RAW and some of RAW's officials, to assassinate another wanted Khalistani terrorist, Gurpant Singh Pannu, who is the leader of Sikhs for Justice, which is another terrorist group that is based out of United States. India has designated Sikhs for Justice as a terrorist organization. Even the Khalistan Tiger Force, which was headed by Hardeep Singh Nijjar, was a proscribed terrorist outfit in India. So these wanted terrorists who were hiding in Canada and US allegedly were targeted by Indian operatives from RAW. And the allegation from US and Canada is that this is a planned, authorized operation under the instructions of the Indian government. India has firmly denied the allegations, and once Canada made this public, it even revealed the identity of India's RAW station chief in Canada. The incident blew out of proportion, and India reacted very aggressively and retaliated against Canada. We have downgraded the bilateral relations. Bilateral ties have been completely downgraded, and the free trade talks that were going on have been suspended by both India and Canada. Even the visa and immigration policies have been downgraded. Both sides have reduced the number of visas that they have been giving. They have pushed the diplomats of each other out. They have forced each other to reduce the diplomatic size of their missions, and a complete reversal of the relationship has been witnessed. Usually this was not expected with a friendly country, that to a Western democracy, but given the way in which Canada has acted and the way in which it has not supported India in taking down the Khalistani outfits, it has indeed become a point of concern for India. But now the allegations have taken it to the next level. With US, we are cooperating in the investigation whether Indian government agents were involved in ordering an assassination of an American citizen. But with Canada, India has refused to cooperate. India has said there is no evidence given by Canada to link the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar with Indian government. So as of now, the relations have taken a complete hit, and that is why the topic could become extremely important for the upcoming mains. It is a controversial topic, but there can be a question on India-Canada relations or the attempts to revive the Khalistan movement abroad and how it affects our ties with friendly countries abroad. So that is why the topic is very crucial, and I hope this explanation will help you to write a good answer for any given question. On this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session, understood and learnt everything that we have studied today. If you did, please support us through your likes. Your likes is what keeps us motivated. It encourages us to do better. Comment below if you're benefiting from the initiative, and starting from Monday, the Conquer Mains initiative will switch to the Unacademy platform. You just have to subscribe to this program by paying a very limited price of $9.99. This is to ensure that we enroll only the serious candidates. There will be one more free session by Sarmad sir. Sarmad sir will be taking up a session on Indian polity, and this session will be available free of cost on YouTube. Just like we are doing with all the subjects, the first class of every subject is available on YouTube, free of cost for everyone. But for the remainder of the course, for the next 2 months, it will be only on the app with a limited subscription fee. So do enroll for the program if you wish to benefit from this initiative. It's the best way for you to comprehensively cover the mains related current affairs of the last 1 year with the static portion. We will help you in developing the linkages between current affairs and static, and will also help you in improving your answer writing skills. Along with discussing one model answer and a practice question, we will give you 4 more questions with the model answers with some written notes. Plus there will be a weekly test every Sunday. So that is what you need to know. And for all the links related to Conquer Mains, you can just go to the description box. There you can find the page to subscribe to the program and also the link to download the PPT and the written notes. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good day and all the best for your upcoming mains.